$3 million in retirement savings. For most Canadians, that's the dream number. And on paper, a number like that should make retirement feel simple. But here's what I've learned after years of working with Canadians who are either right at retirement or already living it. At 3 million, the problem usually isn't, are we going to run out of money? The problem is, how do we turn this into a retirement that actually feels good without accidentally giving away a small fortune in tax? Because retirement at this level is not about hitting a number. It's about the coordination of everything. How the money is structured, how it's withdrawn, how it's taxed, and how the plan holds up when real life happens. So today I want to show you what retirement actually looks like with 3 million, how much you can realistically spend, where people with enough money still get tripped up, and why two couples with the exact same 3 million can end up living completely different retirements. Here's how this actually played out for one real couple. Meet Dave and Karen. They're both 62 and retiring this year. They don't have pensions, their kids are grown, and their house is paid off. They've saved just over $3 million, of which roughly $2 million is in RSPs, about $400,000 is in their TFSAs, and the remaining $600,000 is split between a non-registered account and cash. On paper, everything looks fine. They've done what most disciplined savers do. They've accumulated, they've avoided obvious mistakes, and they feel like they should be okay. But what they didn't have was a clear picture of how this actually turns into retirement income, year by year once they've stopped working, like how their withdrawals would be coordinated and how their tax picture would change over time. None of that was obvious just by looking at the account balances. Because when most people hear 3 million, they picture one big pile of money like it's all equally spendable. But retirement doesn't work like that. At 3 million, what matters isn't the actual amount, it's how much of that money is available to spend after tax and when. The account mix is the difference between comfortable and flexible, and why does this feel way tighter than it should? Because RSP money is not the same as TFSA money. RSPs are pre-tax dollars, and every dollar you pull out is going to be taxable. TFSAs are tax-free, so there's no tax now nor later, whereas non-registered money sits in the middle. Part of what you withdraw is usually your own money coming back, and part of it is growth, and that growth is taxed much more gently than RSP withdrawals. The reality is this, not all $3 million is created equal. So if you have $2 million in an RSP, you do not have $2 million. You have $2 million minus the future tax bill. And the future tax isn't a fixed percentage. It depends on what else is happening that year. So CPP, OAS, RIF minimums, investment income, and even whether one spouse is still alive. So step one of a real retirement plan is not just picking an ETF or debating whether you should be 60-40 versus 70-30. It's mapping out where that money actually sits. At this point, a lot of people realize that they've been thinking about retirement taxes the wrong way, especially when it comes to RSPs, CPP, OAS, and timing. If you want something practical to work through on your own, there's a short guide linked below called 20 Tips You Need to Retire Tax Efficiently in Canada. It outlines the most common tax traps we see in retirement, including RIFs and OAS clawbacks, and the planning levers that can actually make a difference over time. You can download it using the link in the description. Now, one thing that becomes clear pretty quickly at this level is that spending in retirement doesn't work the way most people expect. A lot of people assume it's just a number. Pick a dollar amount, adjust it for inflation, and repeat it every year. That's not how it actually unfolds. At $3 million, sustainable spending isn't a flat line. It moves. So in practical terms, for many households at this level, this often ends up looking like high 5 figures or low 6 figures of after-tax spending. Not as a promise, but more like a range. Some years you're going to spend more, some years you're going to spend less. Where you fall in that range depends on how the money is structured, when government benefits start, and how withdrawals are coordinated over time. For some people, that means relying more heavily on portfolio withdrawals early on. For others, CPP and OAS may already be part of the picture. And those choices matter because as income sources change, the tax picture changes with them, even if your spending doesn't. This is where people get tripped up. They assume that if they pick a safe spending level early, everything else will just work itself out. But at $3 million, the bigger risk usually isn't spending too much in one year. It's pulling income from the wrong place at the wrong time, or layering income sources without coordination, which can quietly create tax problems later, even while the lifestyle itself stays modest. That's why sustainable spending isn't about finding the highest number you can spend. It's about setting up an income pattern that can flex, one that holds up through market volatility, and one that doesn't force unnecessary taxable income later in life. Once you start looking at spending this way as something that shifts over time rather than a single fixed number, the next questions tend to show up naturally. Dave and Karen retired at 62, and as part of their plan, they decided not to start CPP or OAS right away. They wanted flexibility early on with the option to bring those benefits in down the line. So in those first few years, there was no employment income, no CPP, and no OAS coming in. That combination created what's often called the tax valley. So depending on how retirement is structured, this can be the lowest tax environment people will ever see. And it's usually where things get missed. What tends to happen is fairly predictable. People do what feels conservative. They spend from their non-registered accounts and leave their RSPs alone. On the surface, it feels efficient because the tax bill is staying low, but that doesn't mean the tax is gone. It's just deferred. So RSP balances will continue to grow in the background. Then at 71, those RSPs have to be converted to RIFs, and at age 72, minimum withdrawals start whether the income is needed or not. At that point, control starts to slip away. In Dave and Karen's case, the focus in those early years was simply to use that lower tax window intentionally while they were both alive and before government benefits and RIF withdrawals began. That meant gradually drawing from RSPs earlier, not all at once and not aggressively, but just being deliberate about it. Some of that income supported their spending, and some of it went to their TFSAs and non-registered accounts. This is usually the part that feels counterintuitive, because paying more tax today rarely feels like a good idea. But over a full retirement, the objective isn't to minimize tax in any one year, it's to reduce the total tax paid over decades. And in that context, paying 25% now to avoid paying 45 or 50% later isn't a loss, it's a win. Because whatever is left in your RSP or RIF when that last spouse passes away is going to get taxed in that final year. There's no spreading it out over time, it's all going to show up on one tax return. So if the last surviving spouse dies with, say, $1.5 million RIF, the CRA treats that as $1.5 million of income in a single year. And at that level, you're effectively pushed into the top tax brackets. So RSPs work well while you're accumulating. You get the tax deferral when you're earning and saving. But if they're left alone all the way through retirement, the same deferral quietly flips on you at the end. The tax you didn't pay for decades doesn't disappear. It just shows up later in one concentrated hit when there's no flexibility left to deal with it. And by the time you're in that final year, there aren't really any levers left to pull. The only way to change the outcome is earlier in retirement, while there's still room to manage the timing. That's why drawing down RSPs gradually in your 60s can matter so much. Not aggressively, not all at once, just deliberately over time. And as those balances come down, the size of the future RIF comes down with them. And when some of that money ends up in TFSAs or non-registered accounts instead, you regain flexibility for income planning, for taxes, and eventually for your estate. It doesn't mean the taxes just go away. It means you have more control over when it's paid, what rate's going to apply, and who ultimately bears it. And in real life, that pressure often shows up years earlier, long before that final year ever arrives. Now, when it comes to investing $3 million, before retirement, market volatility is mostly emotional. You're still adding money, so downturns are uncomfortable, but time is usually on your side. After retirement, volatility becomes mathematical. Once income is coming out of the portfolio, the order in which returns show up starts to matter a lot more. A bad market early on doesn't just feel worse, it can change how much the portfolio is able to recover later. If markets drop 20% in the first year of retirement and withdrawals are happening at the same time, that loss isn't just temporary, it can permanently reduce your runway. That's what people mean when they talk about sequence of returns risk. And this is why in those first few years of retirement tend to matter a lot more than the next 30. This is usually where investing decisions start to drift to one extreme or the other. Some people pull back too much because they want stability at all costs. Others stay overly aggressive because the balance still looks large and they don't want to give up any growth. Both miss the real shift that's happening. The change isn't about being more conservative because you're older, it's that the portfolio now has a job to do. It has to fund your income. Once that's the job, the question changes. How much of this portfolio needs to be protected from market swings so income can continue even when markets don't cooperate? For most people, the answer isn't forever. It's long enough to get through a rough stretch without being forced to sell growth assets at the wrong time. That's why many retirement portfolios end up holding a portion in cash or short-term bonds, not as a bet against markets, but simply as a buffer. That buffer allows withdrawals to continue during down markets while the rest of the portfolio has time to recover. And the biggest benefit of this structure isn't mathematical, it's behavioral. So when near-term income is already protected, there's far less pressure to react. You're not guessing, you're not scrambling, you're not selling just because markets are down. You're simply following the structure. That's how portfolios make it through volatility in retirement. Not by predicting what markets are going to do next, but by removing the need to react to them. One of the most useful things a well-structured retirement plan gives you is guardrails. Because even if people don't say it out loud, the question underneath almost everything is the same. Are we going to be okay? Dave and Karen, guardrails didn't mean a rigid spending rule, and it definitely didn't mean constantly checking the plan to see whether they were allowed to do something. It just meant that the plan adjusted based on what was actually happening. When markets were strong and things were going well, there was room to do a bit more without overthinking it. So travel felt easier to say yes to. Being generous didn't come with the same hesitation. They weren't looking for permission, they just had confidence that the plan was going to be able to support it. When markets were choppy, the response wasn't dramatic. Nothing needed to be unwound or fixed. They simply didn't layer new spending on top of a rough stretch and gave the plan time to catch up, knowing that this had already been accounted for. What changed the most wasn't the math, it was the feeling. Instead of reacting to headlines or account balances, decisions were being made inside a framework that already assumed that markets wouldn't cooperate all the time. That took the pressure off having to constantly decide whether now was the right time to spend or pull back, and that's what guardrails really provide. They give retirees confidence that they can enjoy what they've built while trusting that if something actually needs to change, the plan will make that obvious without forcing them to guess. The hardest part of retirement usually isn't the math. It's the shift from saver mode to spender mode. For decades, the habits were pretty clear. You saved, you invested, you delayed gratification. That mindset is exactly what got you here, and it doesn't just shut off because you stop working. So even with a solid plan in place, the early years of retirement can feel uncomfortable. Trips get booked, then you find yourself second guessing them. Withdrawals get made and suddenly you're checking balances more often than you expect. Not because anything is wrong with the plan, but because your behavior hasn't quite caught up yet. What actually eases that tension isn't higher returns, it's clarity. Being able to see how the plan holds up across different scenarios before they happen, what it looks like if markets struggle early, if inflation runs higher than expected, or if one spouse lives much longer than the other. When you can see those outcomes in advance, the emotional weight starts to lift. Retirement begins to feel calmer, not because everything is perfect, not because nothing can go wrong, but because you're no longer guessing. Decisions start to come from context instead of fear. And that's when the money finally starts doing what it's meant to do. It supports your life instead of being something you're constantly worried about protecting. Here's the real takeaway. Two households can retire with the same $3 million and have completely different experiences. One feels comfortable, the other feels like they're constantly working a tightrope. And most of the time, the difference isn't the portfolio. It's how everything else is coordinated. Where the money sits, when government benefits starts, how withdrawals are sequenced, so how RSPs are drawn down over time, whether OAS clawbacks are anticipated or stumbled into, and how risks like market timing, estate taxes, and survivor outcomes are actually planned for. So same number, just very different outcome. That's why retirement planning at this stage can't be reduced to a rule of thumb or a spreadsheet with one line that says 4% withdrawal. It needs to be looked at year by year across different scenarios using your actual accounts and your actual timing decisions. Because at this point, retirement success isn't really about how much you've saved, it's about how well everything works together once those paychecks stop. For people who want to see how this comes together using their own numbers, that's exactly what the Atlas system is designed to do. It maps out retirement year by year, so income, taxes, withdrawals, and government benefits, so decisions can be tested before they're locked in. You can learn more about the Atlas system using the link below. So now you know what retirement with $3 million actually looks like. But here's what most people don't realize. The decisions you make in the 5 years before retirement can completely change your tax bill for the next 30. This next video walks you through a simple adjustment that can materially change how retirement unfolds over time. Check that out next.